Welcome to the Explainer. So India has a new criminal code, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, or BNS for short. But what does a new code like this really change? Well, today we're going to dig into the philosophy behind it all, and I mean everything, from why we even need laws in the first place, all the way to how a ship in the middle of the ocean can somehow still be considered Indian territory. It's going to get interesting.
All right, so let's start with the biggest question of all. Right at the beginning, why do we have criminal laws at all? I mean, why can't we all just, get along? The answer, it turns out, is this foundational agreement that we all make without ever signing a single piece of paper.
And that agreement? It's a concept called the social contract. This is basically the philosophical bedrock for any modern criminal code, including the BNS. It's this unwritten deal between all of us and the government, and it's built on a pretty simple, logical idea. Look, it all starts with a simple trade-off. On our own, as individuals, we're pretty vulnerable. So what do? We collectively agree to give up some of our total freedom to a central body, the state. And in exchange for that power, the state's #1 job is to protect us, using the force of law to create a safe and orderly society for everyone.
Okay, so that's the why. Now let's talk about the what. What do these laws actually punish? And right here, the BNS makes a really crucial distinction between what you and I might call a crime in just everyday conversation and what the law formally defines as an offense. They are not the same. So, a crime is sort of a general idea, right? It's an act that harms society, something we all agree is a moral wrong. For a long time, for instance, everyone knew mob lynching was a horrific crime. But it wasn't a specific, legally defined offense. An offense, on the other hand, is an act that the legal code has explicitly named, defined, and attached a very specific punishment to. This difference is absolutely fundamental.
So here's the bottom line, and this is so important. Under the BNS, if an act isn't written down and defined in the code, it is not a legal offense. Now, this isn't just lawyers being picky. It's a huge principle called the rule of law. It makes sure that power can't just be used randomly and that we all know exactly what is and what is not against the law. Okay, so if an offense has to be so clearly defined, what are the ingredients the law is looking for? Well, it turns out, for any act to legally count as an offense, it has to have 4 very specific elements. Think of it like a recipe. For any offense, the law is looking for 4 things. First, it has to be done by a human being. Second, there has to be a guilty mind, what lawyers call mens rea. Basically, there was intent. Third, you can't just think about doing it. There has to be an actual physical act, or actus reus. And finally, that act has to cause some kind of real harm or injury.
Now that first element, that the act has to be committed by a human, that seems pretty obvious, right? But believe it or not, it was not always that simple.
I mean, this might sound completely bizarre to us now, but get this. There's a true story about Mary the elephant. About 100 years ago, after her caretaker reportedly abused her, Mary retaliated and killed him. The public was so outraged that the town literally put the elephant on trial. She was found guilty and publicly hanged from an industrial crane. No, I am not making that up.
The strange, and let's be honest, tragic case of Mary is a perfect example of how our laws evolve with our understanding of the world. Today, the legal system is crystal clear. An animal, no matter what it does, cannot form a guilty mind, that mens rea we talked about. And since that's an absolutely essential ingredient, only a human can be held criminally responsible for an offense.
All right, let's move on to our final question, which builds on everything we've talked about. Where does India's criminal law actually apply? The answer is probably a lot broader than you think, and it's all defined by a concept called jurisdiction.
Jurisdiction is basically a law's power zone, the territory where it has authority. And the BNS gets very, very specific about what exactly counts as India when it comes to enforcing its criminal code.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. For the BNS, India is not just the landmass. It also includes the sea, for up to 12 nautical miles from the coast, the entire column of airspace above the country, any ship or aircraft registered in India, no matter where it is on the planet, and even Indian embassies on foreign soil.
Yeah, just think about it this way. A ship registered in India is, legally speaking, a piece of floating Indian territory. An Indian-registered airplane? That's a piece of flying Indian territory, even if it's over the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So any offense committed on board falls right under the BNS. And the implications of this are huge. So let's say two foreigners get into a fight on an Indian-registered ship in the middle of nowhere. The BNS can apply. But the law's reach goes even further. It actually follows Indian citizens around the world. So if an Indian citizen commits a serious crime in another country, they could potentially be prosecuted under the BNS when they get back home.
So as you can see, a criminal code like the BNS is way more than just a list of things you can't do. It's a whole system. It starts with that social contract, the why, and then builds on that with really precise definitions of what an offense is, who can commit one, and the surprisingly long reach of where the law can find you.
And that brings us to one last big question. We've seen how laws can change over time. So just think about our world today. Things like deepfake technology, or serious environmental damage, or maybe the misuse of our personal data. Which of these things, which are kind of in a legal gray area right now, might become the clearly defined offenses of tomorrow?